Hello, I am Sandra Ferguson. I am lead for the National Trauma Training Framework and based at NHS Education, which is usually called NES. This framework is for the whole Scottish workforce. Unfortunately, the reality is that trauma and adversity is extremely prevalent in the population, particularly prevalent often in the populations that we serve. So the trauma training framework is part of the Scottish Government's ambition to have a trauma-informed Scottish workforce. And there's two key messages that we would like people to understand from the point of view of this work. One is that trauma is everybody's business. Trauma is very prevalent in the population. We also have to appreciate every individual is unique and everyone has a unique way of coping or managing and or developing resilience. We don't need to be trauma experts. The trauma framework has 4 practice levels. So there's practice level 1, which is being trauma informed, and that's for the whole Scottish workforce. And there's other practice levels depending on what your role is and how much direct contact you have with people affected by trauma. You can be across any of those 4 practice levels, and it's not about how senior you are in the organisation, it's about what your role is in terms of dealing with people in front of you. The important things at the trauma-informed level is that for most people, the biggest impact of being exposed to a trauma is the effect it has on their relationships, because the relationship they have with somebody that's hurt them often leads to a loss of trust, a loss of control, a sense of powerlessness. The key thing that we'll stress over and over again is that relationships matter. The trauma training plan is a tool that's been developed for people managing the development of a training for this area, to be able to help them to work through what staff need to know, how they need to know it, what would be the best way to learn it, who would be the best people to train it, and really crucially from our point of view to recognise that staff are members of society too, so they're exposed to the same levels of trauma that other people will. But also staff also have the additional stress that often they're exposed to traumatic experiences in work. So that the trauma-informed principles should also be seen at an organisational level. First R is realising that trauma is common. And the second R is recognising the impact of trauma. It's all that stuff I was saying about that broad impact, that it's not always predictable, that it's unique to people. Thirdly is responding. That's the third R. And that's about thinking about how we respond in a way that supports people to be able to engage with our services and recognises that unique impact that trauma might have had on them. The fourth R has got a slightly overly technical term of resisting re-traumatisation. And re-traumatisation happens when we trigger emotions or feelings from the past. And we can avoid doing that by using those key ideas of engaging people in a way that make them feel safe. Fifth R is the most important one. The fifth R is that relationships matter. Our opening doors animation, and that's been designed specifically to be applicable to a whole wide range of contexts, as a whole range of different examples, and meets the learning outcomes as described in the trauma-informed level of the trauma training framework. The Scottish Trauma-Informed Leaders Training in multidisciplinary groups and helps them to understand the science and rationale of a trauma-informed approach and what that might add to their organisation. The takeaway message from our STILT training is that our staff can't pour from empty buckets, that we need to be providing the infrastructure and the support around them. As people become more trauma-informed, that can happen is that people do disclose, and that can be in the context of a person that's using your service disclosing, or a co-worker, a colleague, or if you're a manager, it might be a staff member. People who are disclosing have known this about themselves all their lives. This is not new information for them. It might be new information for us in our services. We need to enhance trust by making sure that we acknowledge that we've heard the disclosure. The other important thing is to recognise what does that person want you to do with this. Disclosure does not necessarily mean it needs to be referred on to a specialist other agency, unless the person is saying that one of the things they'd like to come out of this is to explore options around other services that they may like to access. Staff self-care is absolutely essential in working in this area. We're all at risk of having been exposed to a whole range of stuff in our lives already, but also the jobs that we choose to do often engage us in situations that are potentially stressful or traumatic as well. There is a risk of vicarious traumatisation, which is the technical term for developing a whole range of trauma responses due to somebody else's trauma exposures. The first A of a really important thing to remember when you're thinking about self-care, which is ABC. It's as simple as that. So A is awareness, being aware of that broad range of things that can happen to people. Being aware of it for yourself, but also being aware of it for your colleagues. B is around balance. So balance is around recognising that we need to engage in things that make us feel better. And the last C of the ABC is the theme of trauma-informed services. That's connection. That we recover and we stay safe and we stay resilient and we stay able to deliver these services by being connected. Relationships matter and we need to be connected